These were Hulk Hogan's final words. Fans are still in shock. Wrestling fans around the world are stunned by the emotional last message of the immortal Hulk Hogan. This is something you'll never forget. In this video, we explore the final words of WWE legend Hulk Hogan, capturing a moment that left millions speechless. From his unforgettable legacy in the ring to his impact on fans and fellow superstars, this emotional farewell will hit hard. If you're a true wrestling fan, you need to see this. The hospital was quiet. Too quiet for a man who had spent most of his life amidst roaring crowds, flashing lights, and thunderous chants of Hogan. Hogan! Hogan! The silence felt unnatural, as if the universe itself had paused to take a breath. In a private room tucked away from the chaos of the emergency wing, Hulk Hogan, real name Terry Bollea, lay motionless, eyes barely open, surrounded by the few people who had remained by his side when the crowds faded and the stage lights dimmed for good. Doctors had said he had hours, maybe minutes. The cardiac arrest had come fast, unforgiving, and irreversible. For a man who had kicked out at 2.5 more times than anyone could count, this moment felt surreal. Fans across the world were still clinging to hope, believing, perhaps naively, that their hero would Hulk up one more time. But deep down, they knew. Hulkamania, the phenomenon that once took the world by storm, was nearing its final breath. The news hadn't yet broken. Cameras weren't outside. TMZ hadn't published the alert. But inside that sterile hospital room in Clearwater, Florida, history was already being written. A nurse, trembling but honored, had been asked to stay close in case he needed anything. A priest had stood silently at the door. And at the center of it all, a man who had once body-slammed giants, wiped tears from children's faces, and told millions to train, say their prayers, and believe in themselves, was preparing to say goodbye. No cameras captured what happened next. No documentary crew was allowed in. But someone did press record on their phone, with Hogan's permission. A close friend. A longtime brother in the business. What was captured was raw, unscripted, and unlike anything Hogan had ever delivered on a microphone. This wasn't about promos, catchphrases, or headlines. This was the final message from a man who lived larger than life, but was now reduced to the fragility of human mortality. He asked for everyone to be quiet. Just for a moment. The tubes and monitors beeped softly around him. He raised his hand, not in the iconic "let me hear you" pose, but as a signal for peace. His voice was raspy, worn down by decades of shouting in arenas, legal battles, surgeries, and a lifetime of living in the public eye. But still, it carried weight. Even now, every syllable mattered. Because Hulk Hogan knew that these could be his final words, and he wanted them to matter. "I just want to say," he began, pausing as his breath caught in his chest, "if this is it for me, I'm okay. I've lived 10 lives. Maybe more. But if there's one thing I hope people remember, one thing I hope lives on, it's not the leg drop. Not the titles. Not even the red and yellow." There was a silence in the room. A wait. As if time itself had leaned in to listen. I hope people remember that I loved them. That I believed in them. That every time I told a kid to never give up, I meant it. That wasn't a gimmick. That was my truth." The nurse wiped her eyes. The friend holding the phone looked away, trying to steady his hand. Hogan coughed, a painful sound, and took another breath. "I made mistakes," he whispered. "More than people know. Some made the papers. Some didn't. I hurt people. I disappointed people. I disappointed myself. But I always tried to get back up. I always tried to make it right. That's what I want people to do, keep getting back up. Because life, man, life will knock you down harder than Andre the Giant ever could." He chuckled softly. It hurt, but he did it anyway. That laugh, the same one fans had heard on talk shows, backstage interviews, and those iconic WrestleMania press conferences, still had a glimmer of life in it. Still had fight. I remember being a kid, he continued, watching wrestlers on black and white TV with my dad. I remember dreaming of being somebody. And somehow, I became that guy for other kids. That's the part one never got used to. Never stopped feeling lucky. I wasn't supposed to make it. I was just a guy from Tampa with a guitar and a dream. But God had a bigger plan. He motioned to a small bedside table. On it was a photo, faded and creased. It was of him holding a young fan, maybe 6 or 7, backstage at a house show. The boy was crying, overwhelmed by emotion, and Hogan had bent down and whispered something into his ear. No one ever knew what he said in that moment. But the boy's face had lit up like Christmas morning. That kid, Hogan whispered, tapping the photo. He's why I did it. He's why I kept going through the surgeries, the lawsuits, the pain. You never forget faces like that. At this point, the friend had tears running down his cheeks. But Hogan kept talking. I've been the hero. I've been the villain. I've been everything in between. But today, I'm just Terry. Just a man. Just a father, a husband, a brother, trying to say thank you. Thank you to the fans. Thank you for the letters, the cheers, the prayers. You kept me alive more times than I can count. He took another breath, this one deeper, heavier. The kind of breath that signals the end of a sentence, and perhaps the end of a story. And if I don't wake up tomorrow, just tell em I said thank you. Tell em I went out knowing I was loved. Tell em Hulk Hogan said goodbye, brother. That was it. That was the moment. The final words of Hulk Hogan. No dramatic music. No arena full of lights. Just a hospital bed, a friend, a phone, and a lifetime of memories folded into one whisper from a legend. The video was never released officially. But word of it leaked. Not the footage itself, Hogan's family made sure of that, but the essence of what was said. Within hours of his passing, a simple sentence began trending worldwide. Tell em I said thank you. Fans started printing it on shirts, writing it on posters, and spray painting it on the walls outside wrestling venues. WWE superstars took to social media, not with lengthy tributes, but with 5 words and a yellow heart. The statement said everything. The man who had defined an era had ended it with grace. Across the country, tribute videos began to pour in. John Cena, visibly emotional, shared a video from his home gym, placing a Hulkamania bandana on the bench and saying, "Thank you for everything, brother. Rest in power." Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson tweeted a photo of Hogan lifting him during his rookie years, writing, "You showed me what it meant to work the crowd and work the heart. I'll never forget." Even Ric Flair, who had his own rivalries with Hogan both in and out of the ring, posted a heartfelt message, "We were lions in the same jungle. Rest easy, champ. You gave this business everything." But it wasn't just the legends. It was the fans. The real pulse of Hulkamania. The stories they told painted a picture of a man whose influence stretched far beyond the squared circle. A man who had visited sick kids in hospitals without telling the press. A man who responded to fan letters personally, even when his hands ached from surgeries. A man who walked into schools unannounced, just to surprise a bullied child who needed a hero. One woman shared a story of being a young girl in the 90s, struggling with cancer. Her Make-A-Wish request was simple, to meet Hulk Hogan. He showed up wearing the belt, signed her cast, and told her that she was stronger than any opponent he ever faced. She survived. And she kept that signed cast, yellowed and cracked, as a reminder of the day Hope walked through her hospital door in red and yellow. Another man recalled a moment in the airport. He had just lost his father. He was crying quietly in a corner when a large, familiar figure sat down beside him. "Tough day, brother?" Hogan asked. The man nodded. Hogan didn't say anything else. Just sat with him. A giant of a man, sitting in silence, offering the strength of his presence. That was the man behind the myth. As the news broke officially, Hulk Hogan dies at 71 following cardiac arrest, WWE aired a tribute package that sent chills down the spines of millions. Opening with slow footage of Hogan's earliest matches, transitioning to WrestleMania 3, the body slam heard round the world, and culminating in his Hall of Fame induction speech where he said, "As long as there's one Hulkamaniac out there, I'll keep fighting." In Tampa, the church filled quickly. It wasn't announced publicly. No media invitations were sent. But word got out, as it always does. And within hours, the pews were overflowing. Fellow wrestlers, lifelong fans, childhood friends, producers, ring technicians, people from every walk of Hogan's extraordinary life, gathered under the quiet arches of St. Patrick's Cathedral. The building, usually reserved for solemn tradition, now buzzed with the presence of legends and everyday heroes who had all been touched by one man's legacy. Triple H arrived early, dressed not in corporate black but in the colors Hogan made iconic: red tie, yellow pocket square. Beside him, Stephanie McMahon, holding a handwritten letter she later revealed was from her late father Vince, one last note addressed to the man who helped turn WWE into a global empire. Ric Flair sat in the front row, eyes hidden behind dark glasses. His white hair trembled slightly in the breeze from the stained glass windows. His hands never stopped fidgeting, a nervous energy, not from anxiety, but from holding back years of memories that now felt like ghosts walking the aisle. Dwayne Johnson entered quietly, choosing a side pew. No entourage. No fanfare. Just a man paying his respects to a giant on whose shoulders he, and the entire wrestling industry, had once stood. The ceremony itself was simple. Just as Hogan would have wanted it. No theatrics. No pyros. Just stories. Laughter. Tears. A microphone on a single podium and one rule: speak from the heart. Jimmy Hart was the first to stand. His voice, once the loudest in any arena, cracked as he began. He wasn't just my tag team partner in life. He was my brother. From Memphis to Madison Square Garden, from Japan to the Silverdome, we saw it all. And I swear to you, not once, did Terry walk past a fan without stopping. Whether it was one kid in the rain or 100 people outside an airport at 2 a.m., he always said the same thing: "They're the reason we exist, brother." The audience was silent. Not a breath out of place. Even the younger wrestlers, many of whom had only met Hogan in passing, sat transfixed. Because this wasn't just about a man, it was about a symbol. A legacy that stretched across decades, continents, and generations. Then, from the back of the room, a tall figure made his way forward. It was John Cena. He paused before the podium, looking out over the sea of mourning faces, then reached into his pocket and unfolded a small, slightly crumpled piece of paper. "I visited him 3 weeks before he passed," Cena began. He didn't want to talk about wrestling. He didn't want to talk about WrestleMania, or the Hall of Fame, or the matches. He wanted to talk about forgiveness. About redemption. He said, "John, we spend so long trying to be larger than life, we forget what it's like to just be alive. We forget to say sorry. We forget to say thank you. We forget to say goodbye." A long pause. And then he told me something I'll never forget. He said, "When I go, don't mourn the hero. Mourn the man. The man who got it wrong, but kept trying. The man who lost his way, but found his light. The man who loved his fans, even when he didn't love himself." Cena folded the paper, stepped down, and returned to his seat. No dramatic pause. No spotlight. Just silence. The kind of silence that says everything. Outside the church, thousands had gathered. They stood shoulder to shoulder, wearing Hulkamania shirts, waving handmade signs that read, "Thank you, brother," and "You still live in us." Some wore bandanas. Others clutched old action figures, faded and worn by time. Some held on to nothing at all, just memories. The funeral procession moved slowly down the streets of Tampa, escorted by motorcycles and followed by a sea of red and yellow. Fans didn't cheer. They stood with hands on hearts, heads bowed. And yet, somehow, you could feel it. That electric energy. That pulse. As if Hogan's spirit still walked among them, larger than life, soaked in spotlight, basking in the adoration one last time. In the weeks that followed, tributes emerged from every corner of the globe. A mural appeared overnight in Venice Beach, painted on the side of a gym Hogan once trained in. It showed him not in a wrestling pose, but sitting on a bench, talking to a young fan, just listening. Just being there. The caption underneath read: "A hero is remembered not for what he did in the ring, but for how he made you feel outside of it." WWE announced the creation of the Hogan Foundation for Kids, a nonprofit dedicated to providing support to underprivileged children across America. Stephanie McMahon, in a press conference, said, "He gave hope to kids who had none. This is our way of making sure Hulkamania never dies." And then came the video. The one that changed everything. 2 weeks after his passing, with the blessing of Hogan's family, WWE released a short, never-before-seen clip, 1 minute long, of Hogan's final recorded words. Not the full hospital moment, but a private video he filmed on his phone the night before his collapse. In it, he sat on his porch, the Florida night behind him, stars twinkling above. "I don't know when I'll go, brother," he said, smiling weakly into the camera. "But when I do, don't cry for me. I had it all. The fans. The moments. The mania. I just hope I gave you something to believe in. And if you ever feel lost, just say your prayers. Take your vitamins. And never stop dreaming, dude. 'Cause dreams, brother, dreams never die." The video went viral. Not just in wrestling circles, but everywhere. It played on news networks. It was shared by politicians, athletes, actors, influencers. It crossed boundaries, shattered algorithms, and reminded the world of something pure, something real. A man who, for all his flaws and controversies, never stopped believing in others. And that, perhaps, is Hulk Hogan's real legacy. Not the title reigns. Not the promos. Not even WrestleMania 3. But belief. He made people believe, in strength, in courage, in the idea that a kid from anywhere could stand tall and face anything life threw at them. He made people feel like heroes. Because he never stopped trying to be one himself. So as the world moves on, as new champions rise and new eras begin, somewhere out there, a little boy is tying a bandana around his head. A little girl is flexing her arms in the mirror. A father is showing his child a grainy YouTube clip of a leg drop that once shook the earth. And they're all saying the same thing. Whatcha gonna do, when the memory of Hulk Hogan runs wild on you? Across oceans and time zones, the shockwaves of Hulk Hogan's passing didn't just ripple, they thundered. Japan, where Hogan was once known not only as an American spectacle but a wrestling technician of rare discipline, held a candlelight vigil outside the Tokyo Dome. Hundreds stood in reverent silence, holding up laminated photos of Hogan's legendary matches against Antonio Inoki. Some fans even wore replicas of his classic IWGP Championship belt, not because of the hardware, but because of what it represented, global respect. There, he wasn't just a showman. He was a warrior. A symbol of crossover greatness. When the bell tolled 10 times at Korakuen Hall the following night, you could hear tears falling as clearly as the count itself. In Mexico, legends of lucha libre paid their own respects. El Santo Jr., the son of Mexico's most beloved masked icon, stood before a crowd of thousands at Arena Mexico and spoke through his mask, voice shaking. He gave wrestlers dignity. He gave fans hope. Even when we didn't speak the same language. We all understood the language of Hulkamania. A tribute match was staged between generations. Father and son luchadors wore red and yellow tights. One high-flying teenager performed a tribute leg drop from the top rope, not as part of the finish, but as part of the farewell. Back in the United States, the lines to visit Hogan's memorial at the WWE Hall of Fame stretched across Orlando. Fans left flowers, signs, hand-drawn portraits. One child, barely 5, left behind a stuffed version of Hogan's iconic plush toy, its arms taped in duct tape bandanas, with a note written in crayon, "To the strongest man ever. I love you, Hulk Hogan." Inside Titan Towers in Stamford, Connecticut, the mood was quieter but no less heavy. Triple H had called for an emergency internal meeting the morning after Hogan's death. Not just to prepare for the tribute shows, but to address the collective grief surging through the company. "I know this is hard," Triple H began, standing in front of a room full of longtime WWE staff, some of whom had been there since the days of Saturday night's main event. "Because this one hurts differently. Terry didn't just carry the brand. He was the brand. He was the reason millions of us ever tuned in, walked in, signed up. And no matter what came later, the world wouldn't have known WWE the way it does without him." There were nods. Quiet sobs. A backstage coordinator wiped her eyes with her Hulkamania sleeve. "It's our job now," Triple H said, "to honor that legacy. And not just on TV. But with how we treat fans. How we inspire. How we believe. The same way he believed in all of us." Plans began immediately for a special edition of Monday Night Raw, dedicated solely to Hulk Hogan. Not just a 10-bell salute. Not just a video package. But an entire night where the roster stepped out of character and spoke directly to the man who'd paved the way. When that night aired, the arena glowed in red and yellow. The stage, the ring ropes, even the lighting rig had been customized in Hogan's honor. No pyro. Just solemn silence as Hogan's theme song played, slowed down, stripped of the iconic electric guitar, transformed into a mournful piano melody that sent chills down every spine. The show opened with no announcers. Just a single spotlight on an empty ring. In the center stood the classic WWE microphone suspended from the rafters. A moment of silence. Then, one by one, superstars appeared. Not in gear. Not in gimmick. But as themselves. Roman Reigns was first. Dressed in all black, his voice unusually soft. "I watched my uncles wrestle this man. I watched my father respect him. And I watched as he became something bigger than this business. Hulk Hogan didn't just create fans, he created believers. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for the path he carved." Then came Randy Orton. His voice was gravel, his tone reverent. "My dad stood across the ring from Hogan. He told me one thing, that Terry knew how to command a room with just a look. That's rare. That's power. And now, that light's gone." Liv Morgan, mascara streaked across her face, stepped forward next. "He was the first wrestler I ever watched. He made me believe I could be strong, even if I wasn't the biggest. He made me believe in myself." I think that's the real secret of Hulkamania. It wasn't about him. It was about us. Throughout the night, the tributes continued. Not just in words, but in matches, each one with a subtle nod. A leg drop here. A big boot there. Some wrestlers wore Hulkamania gear. Others just paused to salute the crowd, the way Hogan used to, hand to ear, letting the noise rush in. Backstage, legends gathered quietly. Shawn Michaels. The Undertaker. Stone Cold Steve Austin. None of them said much, but the moment they shared together, sitting in silence, watching the tribute from gorilla position, was one that would be remembered forever. And then, right before the final segment, the arena went dark. A single video began to play on the Jumbotron. It was Hogan. Young. Vibrant. In his prime. The video wasn't edited like a standard package. There were no flashy transitions, no background music. Just his voice. "Let me tell you something, brother," he began, arms flexing, the energy of 1,000 crowds pouring out of him. "When you believe in yourself, when you say your prayers and take your vitamins and stick by your brothers, there ain't nothing you can't do. There's no mountain too tall, no match too hard, no dream too big. Then, the screen faded to black. But a new voice came through. An older one. Raspy. Slower. His final words, from the hospital. "And if I don't get to see you again, just remember one thing. I loved you all. Thanks for letting me be your hero." The crowd stood in silence. Then, one by one, people began to chant. "Thank you, Hogan, thank you, Hogan," the chant grew. It spread across the arena like wildfire. Until it felt like every voice in the world was calling back to him, one last time. Outside of WWE, the ripple effect continued. Talk shows devoted segments to his passing. Oprah replayed her iconic interview with him from the 90s. ESPN ran a week-long retrospective of his most legendary matches. Netflix re-released the Hulk Hogan biopic project, now featuring unseen behind-the-scenes footage and exclusive commentary from Hogan's family. In Hollywood, his former co-stars paid tribute. Sylvester Stallone, emotional during a late-night interview, said, "He wasn't just a performer. He was a fighter. In the ring, in life. And when I last saw him, he looked me dead in the eye and said, 'Sly, if I go, make sure they remember the man, not the myth.'" Arnold Schwarzenegger posted a photo of them arm wrestling backstage at a WrestleMania after-party. The caption was simple, "My friend. My hero. My brother in iron." And in a stunning move, Disneyland announced that a section of the park's wrestling-themed stunt show would be renamed Hulk Hogan Arena. A tribute not just to the wrestler, but the character, the heart, the idea that even in fantasy, heroes matter. But perhaps the most moving moment came from an unlikely place, a small church in Venice, Florida, where Hogan's high school wrestling coach stood before a local congregation. He held up an old, yellowed yearbook. "I coached Terry when he was just a scared, awkward kid. Big, strong, but unsure of himself. And I remember one day, he asked me, 'Coach, do you think I could ever be something?' I looked at him and said, 'You already are, son. You just don't know it yet.'" The coach smiled, wiping his eyes. He believed it. And the world believed with him. The eulogy ended not with a hymn, but with a request. The pastor looked out at the gathered crowd and said, "Let's send him off the only way we know how." And they did. The entire room stood, cupped their hands to their ears, and shouted one final time, "Whatcha gonna do when Hulkamania runs wild on you?" The sound echoed out the windows. Into the streets. Into history. Weeks passed. But the weight of Hulk Hogan's absence didn't fade, it settled. Like fog over the Florida coast, soft but constant. And for his family, the silence that came after the tributes was perhaps the loudest sound of all. Inside Hogan's Clearwater home, the house felt like a museum. The boots from WrestleMania 3 still stood beside a shelf of VHS tapes labeled in Hogan's own handwriting. Training Day, 1986, First Japan Tour, Kids Hospital Visit, Tampa. There were unopened fan letters stacked on the kitchen counter, some dated years back, others delivered just days after his death. The red and yellow bandana still hung on the coat hook near the front door. His daughter Brooke stayed behind longer than she expected. She'd intended to sort through paperwork, sign documents, help with the estate, but found herself paralyzed by the weight of her father's presence. Every room carried his echo. His laugh. His scent. His stories. On the back patio, she placed a rocking chair beside his old one. And every night, she sat there and spoke aloud, telling him what fans were saying, what celebrities were writing, what the world was doing in his honor. She read him tweets, Instagram posts, newspaper articles. She played him tribute songs and TikToks from young fans discovering Hulkamania for the first time. She told him, through tears, "You didn't just raise me, Dad. You raised millions." Nick Hogan, more private in his grief, took a different route. He returned to the gym. The same gym where his father taught him to lift. Where they had trained together. Sweated. Argued. Laughed. He wore his father's old training shirt, faded yellow, the fabric nearly transparent. And in that gym, beneath fluorescent lights and the clang of iron, he felt something powerful. Not just absence. Not just pain. But responsibility. Because Hulk Hogan wasn't just a wrestler. He was a movement. And movements don't die. They evolve. Behind the scenes, WWE quietly worked on something bigger. Something permanent. Triple H and the board had approved the creation of the Hulk Hogan Memorial Center, a state-of-the-art museum, media archive, and youth wrestling training camp located in Hogan's hometown of Tampa. The goal wasn't to glorify the character, but to preserve the mission. A place where underprivileged kids could train, learn, believe. Where Hulkamania wasn't just remembered, but passed on. Stephanie McMahon described the idea during a private strategy call. He used to say, "Let the kids believe in something bigger than themselves." That's what this is about. Not nostalgia. Not just history. Legacy. The center would include memorabilia, yes. But also a scholarship fund. A mentorship program. A health and fitness initiative teaching children about discipline, strength, and perseverance. All rooted in the philosophy Hogan had championed in every promo: believe in yourself. Meanwhile, Hogan's family began planning a more private memorial. A gathering by the beach he loved most, with only those closest to him. No suits. No speeches. Just bonfires, memories, and the sound of waves crashing under a Florida sky. There, friends and family would release lanterns into the night sky, each one carrying a written message. Some were humorous: "One more leg drop in heaven, brother." Others, deeply emotional: "You taught me to believe in my son when doctors didn't." One child wrote in barely legible handwriting, "Thank you for being my hero. Love, Max, age 6. Brooke, holding back tears, read her own aloud before letting her lantern go. "You were more than strong. You were kind. And you never stopped hugging me, even when the world tried to pull you away. I love you, Daddy." The night sky filled with glowing lights, drifting upward like pieces of Hulkamania returning to the stars. But the legacy wasn't confined to Florida. Around the world, artists, writers, athletes, and everyday fans found their own ways to honor him. A mural went up in London's Shoreditch district, painted across the side of a boxing gym. It showed Hogan in black and white, except for the red and yellow bandana still in full color. Below it, in spray paint, the words, "Real American. Forever." In Brazil, a capoeira group performed a routine to a slowed-down remix of his theme song. In India, a wrestling academy hosted an open Hulkamania Day, inviting kids to dress up, perform speeches, and learn about his legacy. Even in Nairobi, Kenya, a small community center hung a banner over its gym doors that read, "Whatcha gonna do when you start believing in you?" Back in America, fans continued to share stories online. One viral post came from a retired soldier who had once met Hogan during a USO tour in Afghanistan. The man shared a photo of Hogan crouched beside him, both flexing, dusty and sunburned under a canvas tent. The caption read, "He walked into our mess hall unannounced. No cameras. No press. Just him. And he sat with us. Ate with us. Called us heroes. But he was the real one. He made us laugh when we hadn't in weeks. I don't care about scandals or what the media said. That day, Hulk Hogan reminded me what it meant to fight." The post garnered over 3 million shares. For many, Hogan's loss reopened not just memories, but grief. Because mourning him meant mourning childhood. Innocence. The idea that heroes could be simple, loud, and unbreakably good. He didn't just sell merchandise, he sold hope. He made the impossible seem one flex away from happening. He made the ring a stage not just for violence, but for storytelling, morality, and transformation. And now, that voice was gone. But something else emerged. A generation of wrestlers, now the leaders of the locker room, began embracing the ethos Hogan lived by. Not the pageantry. Not the showbiz, but the values, positivity, resilience, and connection with fans. Cody Rhodes began including red and yellow tape on his boots. Bianca Belair started ending interviews with the words, "Believe in yourself, always." Sami Zayn spoke at a youth rally about Hulkamania and how it taught him to never fear failure. Even The Miz, long the sarcastic heel, broke character during a fan event and shared how Hogan had once pulled him aside and said, "You've got it, kid. Don't let them break you." For every scandal that had tried to define Hogan's late years, these stories rewrote the narrative. Not by ignoring the past, but by acknowledging the full man, his flaws, his redemption, and his fight to remain worthy of the love he had been given. And then came WrestleMania. It had only been months since his passing, but the main event opened with something never seen before. A hologram. Projected into the middle of the stadium, with lights dimmed and music halted, stood a young Hulk Hogan. Circa 1984, pointing toward the camera, larger than life. And then his voice played, not from AI, not from an impression, but from a recording never before aired. "I may be gone, brothers and sisters, but if you believe in yourself, if you believe in your dreams, I'll always be there. Running wild with you." The crowd erupted. Not in tears. Not in silence. But in thunderous applause. Because somehow, in that moment, they knew, he hadn't really left. Hulkamania, after all, was never about one man. It was about all of us. The little kid who stood up to bullies. The teen who found strength in the gym. The adult who needed one more reason to keep going. And so, as the fireworks exploded across the sky, as the final WrestleMania match closed, and as the world stood up from their couches, stadium seats, and bar stools, one phrase rose above all else. A phrase whispered by the dying breath of a hero. "Tell him I said thank you." And a world full of Hulkamaniacs, past, present, and future, answered back. "Thank you, Hogan. Forever."